I never thought I would end up testifying in court against my own HOA president. But there I was on that humid Tuesday morning in Jacksonville, Florida, watching Patricia Henderson squirm in her defendant's chair while the prosecutor laid out evidence of felony burglary. The whole nightmare started 3 months earlier when I made the mistake of buying a professional-grade Husqvarna chainsaw and storing it in my detached workshop behind my house on Magnolia Creek Drive. My name is Henry Campbell, and I have lived in the Riverside Oaks community for 8 years. I am a landscape contractor who works on commercial properties throughout Duval County, and my workshop is essential to my business. I keep all my equipment there, everything from mowers to hedge trimmers to power tools worth thousands of dollars. The workshop sits about 30 feet behind my main house, a separate building I constructed myself after getting proper permits from the city. The HOA gave me grief about it initially, claiming it was not aesthetically pleasing enough for their standards, but I followed every rule in their covenant, and they eventually backed down. Patricia Henderson became HOA president 2 years ago, and she transformed our quiet neighborhood into her personal fiefdom almost immediately. She was 53 years old with that signature haircut. You know, the one where it is short in the back and angles down toward the front. She drove a white Lexus SUV and wore expensive athleisure outfits, even though I never saw her exercise once. Her husband Richard was a dentist who seemed perpetually exhausted, probably from dealing with her constant complaints and power trips. The trouble began on a Saturday morning in early March. I had just purchased a brand new Husqvarna 450 Rancher chainsaw for $1,200 because I landed a contract to clear some overgrown properties near the St. Johns River. It was a beautiful piece of equipment, powerful and reliable, exactly what I needed for the job. I unboxed it in my workshop, filled it with the proper fuel mixture, tested it briefly to make sure everything ran smoothly, then locked it securely in my tool cabinet before heading inside for lunch. I was eating a sandwich in my kitchen when I heard my doorbell ring. Through the window, I could see Patricia standing on my porch wearing white capri pants and a pink polo shirt, her arms crossed in that way that meant she was already angry about something. I considered pretending I was not home, but she had definitely seen my truck in the driveway. "Henry, we need to talk about the noise," Patricia said the moment I opened the door. She did not even bother with a greeting. "What noise?" I asked, genuinely confused. "That chainsaw you were running this morning. Mrs. Kowalski called me at 8:30 complaining about the racket." "You know the noise ordinance clearly states no power equipment before 9 on weekends." I glanced at my watch. It was barely noon. "Patricia, I tested the saw for maybe 2 minutes and it was after 10 o'clock. I am very careful about the noise rules." Her eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Kowalski said it was earlier. Are you calling her a liar?" "I am saying she was mistaken. I was not even in my workshop before 9:30 this morning." Patricia pulled out her phone and started typing something. "I am documenting this interaction. The HOA board takes noise complaints very seriously, Henry. This is going in your file." "There was no violation," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I followed all the rules. We will see about that. I am going to canvass the other neighbors and get statements." She turned on her heel and marched back to her Lexus, leaving me standing there frustrated and annoyed. That was just the opening salvo. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia found reasons to knock on my door 6 more times. My grass was a 1/4 inch too tall according to her measurements. My mailbox post needed repainting even though I had painted it the previous fall. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes past the allowable time on trash day. She was targeting me specifically, because my next-door neighbor Jim had garbage cans sitting out for hours, and she never said a word to him. The harassment escalated when Patricia decided my workshop was somehow violating the architectural guidelines. She showed up one Wednesday afternoon with her phone out, taking photographs of the building from every angle. "What are you doing?" I called out from where I was loading equipment into my truck, documenting potential violations. "I do not recall approving this structure." "You were not even on the board when I built it 5 years ago. I have all the permits and HOA approval in my files." "I need to see those documents immediately," Patricia demanded. "I will email you copies by tomorrow," I said, annoyed but still trying to be cooperative. "That is not acceptable." "I need them today." "Patricia, I have to get to a job site. I will send them tomorrow." She stepped closer, her face flushed with anger. "You seem to think the rules do not apply to you, Henry. That attitude is going to cause you serious problems." I climbed into my truck without responding and drove away, watching her in my rearview mirror as she continued photographing my property. When I got home that evening, I spent an hour digging through my file cabinet to find the original workshop approval documents. I scanned them and emailed them to Patricia with all the board members copied, including documentation showing that the previous HOA president, Michael Torres, had signed off on everything. Patricia replied within 10 minutes with a curt message saying the board would review the matter. She did not acknowledge that I had followed proper procedure or apologize for the accusation. That was just how she operated, constantly attacking and never admitting when she was wrong. Things came to a head on a Monday morning in late March. I woke up around 6:30 and went through my usual routine, making coffee and checking my schedule for the day. I had a big job starting that morning, clearing fallen trees from a commercial property that had been damaged during a recent storm. I needed to get there by 8, so I went out to my workshop at 7 to load my equipment. The moment I unlocked the workshop door, I knew something was wrong. My tool cabinet was standing open even though I always kept it locked. The chainsaw was gone. The brand new Husqvarna that I had only used twice was missing, along with the carrying case and the extra chain I had purchased with it. I stood there staring at the empty space where $1,200 worth of equipment should have been, trying to process what happened. The workshop door showed no signs of forced entry. The lock was intact. Someone had come in with a key or picked the lock professionally. I checked the cabinet lock and found tiny scratch marks around the keyhole that had not been there before. My first call was to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. A deputy named Martinez arrived 40 minutes later and took my statement while examining the workshop. He was a younger guy, maybe 30, with a professional demeanor that put me slightly at ease. "Any idea who might have taken it?" Martinez asked while photographing the cabinet and door. "I have suspicions, but no proof," I said carefully. "Go ahead and share those suspicions. We can investigate." I explained the situation with Patricia Henderson, the constant harassment, the threats about my workshop violating guidelines, all of it. Martinez took notes and asked for her contact information. "Has she ever been inside your workshop?" he asked. "Never. I do not let HOA board members on my property without notice, and she has never asked to come in here." Martinez examined the lock more closely. This was definitely picked. "See these marks? Someone used a tension wrench and a pick. It is not expert work, but it is effective. You can buy lock-picking sets online pretty easily these days." "So what happens now?" I asked. "I will file a burglary report and follow up with your HOA president. If we can establish probable cause, we might be able to get a search warrant." "Do you have the serial number for the chainsaw?" I did. I always kept meticulous records of my equipment for insurance and tax purposes. I provided Martinez with the serial number, purchase receipt, and photos I had taken of the saw when I first unboxed it. He added everything to his report and said someone would be in touch. I had to rent a chainsaw that day to complete my job, which cost me another $150. I was furious, not just about the theft but about the violation of my space and property. Someone had broken into my workshop, my private building, and stolen my equipment. That was not just annoying, it was criminal. That evening I received an email from Patricia marked urgent. The subject line read, "Emergency HOA Board Meeting Required." My stomach dropped as I opened it. The email stated that multiple neighbors had complained about my workshop being used for commercial purposes in violation of the HOA covenants. Patricia claimed she had received reports of excessive noise, unsightly equipment, and decreased property values due to my business activities. The board was calling an emergency meeting for Thursday evening to discuss potential fines and injunctive relief. I read the email 3 times, my anger building with each pass. This was retaliation, plain and simple. Patricia knew the police were investigating her, so she was launching a preemptive strike to make me look like the problem. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. I called my attorney, David Schultz, first thing Tuesday morning. David had helped me with some contract disputes in the past, and he understood HOA law fairly well. I explained the entire situation, from the harassment to the theft to Patricia's latest email. "Do not respond to her email yet," David advised. "Let me review your HOA covenants and the documentation for your workshop. If she is retaliating against you for making a police report, that is a serious problem for her. Florida law protects homeowners from retaliation." "What about the meeting on Thursday? Go to it. Be calm and professional. Bring all your documentation showing you have approval for the workshop and that you are following the rules. Record the meeting if Florida is a 2-party consent state, which it is, so actually, let them know you are recording for your records. Document everything." David called me back that afternoon with good news. After reviewing the covenants, he confirmed my workshop was completely compliant. The previous board had approved it in writing, and nothing in the covenants prohibited homeowners from operating home-based businesses as long as they did not create excessive traffic or disturbance. His landscaping business did not involve clients coming to my home. I left for job sites and returned in the evening, exactly like someone commuting to an office. "She does not have a leg to stand on," David said. "But she is the HOA president, so she can make your life difficult even if she is wrong. The good news is that if she keeps harassing you, especially now that you have made a police report, we can file suit for injunctive relief and damages." Wednesday afternoon, Deputy Martinez called me with an update. "I interviewed Patricia Henderson yesterday at her home. She denied taking your chainsaw and seemed offended that I would even suggest it. She claims she was home all Monday morning and her husband can verify that." "Did you believe her?" I asked. "Does not matter what I believe. Matters what I can prove." I asked if she would consent to a search of her property and she refused. She said she is going to file a complaint about police harassment. Of course she did. "Here is the thing though," Martinez continued. "While I was there, I noticed her garage door was open. I did not go inside, but from where I was standing on her driveway, I could see what looked like a chainsaw case on a shelf. Orange and black, which matches the Husqvarna colors you described." My pulse quickened. "So what is the next step?" "I am going to talk to the state attorney's office about getting a search warrant." "The lock-picking marks, the timing right after your conflict with her, The threats about your workshop and what I observed in her garage might be enough for probable cause. I will let you know." Thursday evening arrived, and I drove to the community clubhouse for the emergency board meeting with a folder full of documentation and a knot in my stomach. The clubhouse was a small building near the neighborhood entrance. Nothing fancy, just a meeting room with folding chairs and a kitchenette. When I walked in at 7, all 5 board members were already seated at a folding table at the front of the room. Patricia sat in the middle wearing a navy blazer and a smug expression. About 15 other homeowners were scattered in the audience chairs. I recognized most of them, including Jim from next door, who gave me a supportive nod. Mrs. Kowalski, the elderly woman who had supposedly complained about my chainsaw noise, was sitting in the front row looking confused. "Good evening, Henry," Patricia said with false sweetness. "Thank you for coming. We have some serious matters to discuss regarding your property. Before we start, I want to state for the record that I am recording this meeting on my phone for my personal records," I said, pulling out my phone and setting it on the chair next to me. Patricia's smile faltered. "That will not be necessary. Florida is a 2-party consent state, so I am notifying everyone that I am recording. Does anyone object?" The other board members looked at each other uncomfortably. Tom Richardson, the vice president and a reasonable guy who worked in banking, shook his head. "I do not object. Transparency is good." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue but thought better of it. "Fine. Let's begin. We have received multiple complaints about your workshop and its use for commercial purposes. The covenants clearly state that homes in this community are for residential use only. May I see those complaints?" I asked. "I would like to know specifically what I am being accused of." "The complaints are confidential to protect the privacy of the complainants." "That is convenient," I said. "Patricia, you know as well as I do that my workshop was approved by the HOA board 5 years ago. I have all the documentation right here." I pulled out the folder and held it up. Every permit, every approval, every inspection, all signed off by the board. "That was a previous board," Patricia said dismissively. "We are reevaluating whether that approval was granted appropriately." Tom Richardson cleared his throat. "Patricia, if the previous board approved the structure and it was built in compliance with the covenants, I do not think we can retroactively revoke that approval." "The covenants prohibit commercial activity," Patricia snapped. "Henry is running a business out of that workshop." "I store my equipment there," I corrected. "I do not meet with clients there. I do not have employees working there. I do not generate traffic or noise beyond what any homeowner might create with lawn care or home improvement projects. My business is completely compliant with the covenants." Mrs. Kowalski raised her hand tentatively. "Excuse me, but I am confused. Patricia told me this meeting was about approving new landscaping for the entrance. I did not complain about Henry's workshop. I do not even live near him." The room went silent. Patricia's face turned red. "Mrs. Kowalski, we will discuss the landscaping after we address this matter." "But you said I complained about noise." "I never said that. Henry is always very quiet." "There must have been a misunderstanding," Patricia said quickly, but the damage was done. Other homeowners were whispering to each other, and the board members were exchanging looks. I decided to go for broke. "Patricia, did you break into my workshop and steal my chainsaw?" The room erupted. Patricia shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How dare you accuse me of theft? This is slander." "It is only slander if it is false," I said calmly. "My chainsaw was stolen from my locked workshop on Monday morning. The lock was picked. I filed a police report and the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is investigating." "The timing is awfully convenient, do not you think? You threaten my workshop and then someone breaks in and steals my equipment. I had nothing to do with that, Patricia shouted. You are trying to distract from your violations. What violations? Tom Richardson asked, looking between us. Henry, do you have the documentation showing your workshop was approved? I walked to the front and handed the folder to Tom. He opened it and began reading through the permits and approval letters while Patricia fumed beside him. The other board members leaned over to look as well. This all looks in order, Tom said after a few minutes. Michael Torres signed off on everything. The workshop meets setback requirements and size restrictions. I do not see any violations here. He is running a business, Patricia insisted. A home-based business that does not generate traffic or disturbance, Tom said. That is not prohibited by our covenants. Patricia, I think we need to table this matter. There does not appear to be any violation to address. Patricia looked like she was going to explode, but before she could respond, the clubhouse door opened and Deputy Martinez walked in, followed by another officer I did not recognize. Sorry to interrupt, Martinez said. I am looking for Patricia Henderson. That is me, Patricia said, her voice suddenly uncertain. What is this about, madam? We have a warrant to search your residence and vehicles in connection with a burglary investigation. We need you to come with us now. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Patricia's face went white. This is ridiculous. I am in the middle of an HOA meeting. I understand, but we need to execute this warrant now. You can come voluntarily or we can place you in handcuffs, your choice. Patricia grabbed her purse with shaking hands. My husband is going to hear about this. Our attorney will have your badges. She stormed out with the two officers, leaving the rest of us sitting in stunned silence. Tom Richardson cleared his throat. I think we should adjourn this meeting. Henry, your workshop is approved and there are no violations. Meeting adjourned. I drove home in a daze, barely able to process what had just happened. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was Martinez. We found your chainsaw, he said without preamble. It was in Patricia Henderson's garage, right where I spotted it. Still has the serial number matching your receipt. We also found lock-picking tools in her car. You are kidding. Nope. We arrested her for burglary and possession of burglary tools. She is being processed now. You will need to come identify your property and sign some paperwork, but you will get your chainsaw back. I cannot believe she actually did it, I said, even though I had suspected it all along. People do stupid things when they think they are above the law. HOA presidents seem especially prone to it. I have worked half a dozen cases like this over the years. I went to the sheriff's office the next morning and confirmed the chainsaw was mine. It was sitting in an evidence bag, looking exactly as it had when I last saw it in my workshop. Martinez explained that Patricia had been released on bail overnight, but was facing felony burglary charges. Because the chainsaw was worth over $1,000, it qualified as grand theft under Florida law, making it a third-degree felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Will she actually do time? I asked. Depends on her record and how the state attorney wants to proceed. First offense, she might get probation and community service, but she is definitely going to have a felony conviction if she is found guilty or pleads out. The next few weeks were chaotic. Patricia's arrest made the local news, with reporters showing up in our neighborhood to interview residents about the scandal. Most of my neighbors were supportive, expressing shock that their HOA president had committed burglary. A few remained loyal to Patricia, claiming she was being set up or that I had somehow provoked her into it. The HOA board held an emergency meeting to remove Patricia as president. Tom Richardson took over as interim president and immediately issued a written apology to me for the harassment I had endured. He also announced that the board would be reviewing all of Patricia's actions over the past 2 years to identify any other instances of abuse of power. That review uncovered a mess. Patricia had been issuing fines to homeowners for bogus violations and pocketing the money instead of depositing it in the HOA account. She had approved contracts for maintenance work with companies owned by her relatives at inflated prices. She had used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including her car payments and country club dues. The board turned all of the evidence over to the state attorney, who added fraud and embezzlement charges to Patricia's burglary case. I received a subpoena to testify at Patricia's trial in June. Her attorney had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Patricia refused to admit guilt. She insisted she was being persecuted and that I had planted the chainsaw in her garage somehow, despite the lock-picking tools found in her car and the lack of any evidence supporting her conspiracy theory. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the second day, walking the jury through the timeline of Patricia's harassment, the theft of my chainsaw, and the recovery of my property from her garage. Patricia's attorney tried to make me look like a vindictive neighbor who was exaggerating minor disputes, but the evidence was overwhelming. Deputy Martinez testified about finding the chainsaw in Patricia's garage and the lock-picking tools in her vehicle. A forensic locksmith testified that the marks on my workshop lock were consistent with the tools found in Patricia's possession. The prosecution introduced evidence of Patricia's embezzlement scheme, arguing it showed a pattern of believing she was above the law. Patricia took the stand in her own defense, which her attorney clearly did not want her to do. She rambled for over an hour about how I was a troublemaker who violated HOA rules constantly, how the neighborhood had gone downhill since I built my workshop, how she was just trying to maintain property values. When the prosecutor cross-examined her, she fell apart, contradicting herself multiple times and eventually admitting she had gone into my workshop to inspect it for violations. And while you were inspecting without permission or a warrant, you decided to take the chainsaw, the prosecutor asked. I was confiscating contraband, Patricia shouted. He was not supposed to have commercial equipment in a residential area. So you broke into his locked building and stole his property because you disagreed with how he used it. It was not stealing. I am the HOA president. I have authority. Her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts including burglary, grand theft, possession of burglary tools, fraud, and embezzlement. The sentencing hearing happened 4 weeks later. Patricia's attorney argued for probation, emphasizing that she had no prior criminal record and had already suffered reputational damage from the case. The prosecutor argued for prison time, pointing out that Patricia had abused a position of trust and shown no remorse for her actions. I attended the sentencing with several of my neighbors, including Jim and Tom Richardson. Patricia sat at the defense table wearing a conservative dress, her signature haircut looking limp and defeated. Her husband Richard sat in the back row looking exhausted and miserable. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s named Sandra Moss. She reviewed the presentence report and the arguments from both attorneys before turning to Patricia. Mrs. Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to lead fairly and follow the rules you were tasked with enforcing. Instead, you used your position to harass a neighbor, commit burglary, and steal from your own HOA. You have shown no genuine remorse for your actions, instead insisting you were justified in breaking the law. The court finds that probation would not adequately address the seriousness of these offenses. Judge Moss sentenced Patricia to 3 years in state prison for the burglary, with concurrent sentences for the other charges. She also ordered Patricia to pay full restitution to the HOA for the embezzled funds, which totaled over $30,000, plus restitution to me for my legal fees and the cost of renting equipment while my chainsaw was missing. Patricia broke down crying as the bailiff led her away in handcuffs. Richard left the courtroom without speaking to anyone. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness watching her go. I had not wanted to destroy anyone's life. I just wanted to be left alone to run my business and live peacefully in my home. The aftermath took months to fully resolve. Richard divorced Patricia while she was in prison and moved out of the neighborhood. Their house sat empty for a while before eventually selling at a loss. The HOA had to hire a forensic accountant to untangle Patricia's financial misconduct and implement new controls to prevent future embezzlement. Tom Richardson became the permanent HOA president and did an excellent job of restoring trust and competence to the board. I got my chainsaw back after it was released from evidence. It worked perfectly, as if the whole ordeal had never happened, at least mechanically. Every time I used it, though, I thought about that morning when I discovered it missing and the cascade of events that followed. My neighbors treated me differently after the trial. Some saw me as a hero who had stood up to a tyrant. Others thought I should have just moved away instead of pressing charges and sending someone to prison. I tried not to worry about either perspective. I had simply refused to be bullied and had pursued justice through legitimate legal channels. The story made regional news and even got picked up by a few national outlets as an example of HOA abuse gone wrong. I got calls from reporters wanting interviews, from other homeowners dealing with similar HOA problems asking for advice, and even from a production company wanting to make a documentary about the case. I declined most of the attention. I just wanted to move on with my life. About 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, I was working in my yard on a Saturday morning when a woman I did not recognize pulled up in front of my house. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, and looked nervous as she approached me. "Are you Henry Campbell?" she asked. "Yes, can I help you? My name is Rebecca Torres. I am Michael Torres's sister. He was the HOA president who approved your workshop." I remember Michael. He was fair and reasonable. I was sorry when he moved to Atlanta. He wanted me to reach out to you. He read about what happened with Patricia Henderson and he felt terrible. He said he always knew she was power-hungry, but he never imagined she would do something like this. "It is not his fault," I said. "Patricia made her own choices." He also wanted me to tell you something about Patricia. When she first joined the HOA board about 5 years ago, she tried to get Michael to deny your workshop application. She claimed it would hurt property values and set a bad precedent. Michael investigated thoroughly and found that your plans were completely compliant, so he approved them despite her objections. I did not know that. Patricia held a grudge. Michael said she brought up your workshop at almost every board meeting, always looking for ways to revoke the approval or fine you for violations. He had to shut her down repeatedly. When he moved away and she became president, he worried she would go after you. He just never thought she would commit crimes to do it. The information explained so much. Patricia's vendetta against me had not been about noise complaints or property values. It had been about power and resentment, about me daring to build something she had tried to stop, and about being told no when she was used to getting her way. Rebecca handed me an envelope. "Michael also wanted to contribute to your legal fees. He feels like he should have warned you before he left." "That is not necessary," I said, but she insisted I take it. Inside was a check for $5,000, and a handwritten note from Michael apologizing and thanking me for standing up to Patricia. I was touched by the gesture and used the money to upgrade my workshop security with better locks, a camera system, and a proper alarm. Life gradually returned to normal. My business continued to thrive. The HOA board under Tom's leadership was reasonable and fair, enforcing rules consistently without the personal vendettas that had characterized Patricia's tenure. I even volunteered to serve on the Architectural Review Committee, figuring my experience could help other homeowners avoid similar conflicts. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia was released on parole after serving 18 months of her sentence. She moved to somewhere in North Florida, far from Jacksonville, trying to rebuild her life. I never saw or heard from her again directly, which was fine with me. I held no ill will toward her by that point, but I had no desire for any interaction either. The case became something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles. David Schultz, my attorney, started giving presentations at legal conferences about HOA governance and the danger of unchecked authority. He used my case as an example, always anonymizing the details but making the point clear. HOA board members are not above the law, and homeowners have rights that must be respected. I thought about the whole experience often, especially when I was working in my workshop with that Husqvarna chainsaw. The sound of the engine reminded me not just of the theft and the legal battle, but of something more fundamental about standing up for yourself and refusing to be intimidated. Patricia had assumed I would just comply with her harassment, that I would be too tired or too afraid to fight back. She had miscalculated badly. The workshop itself became a symbol in the neighborhood, not of commercial intrusion into a residential area, but of the importance of following proper procedures and respecting homeowner rights. When new residents moved in, they often heard the story and would stop by to introduce themselves and see the famous workshop that had brought down an HOA president. One afternoon in late October, about a year after Patricia's sentencing, I was organizing tools in the workshop when Jim from next door knocked on the open door. "Hey, Henry, got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, come in." Jim stepped inside and looked around with interest. He had never actually been in the workshop before. "Nice setup you have here, very organized." "Thanks. What's up?" "I just got elected to the HOA board. Tom asked me to join and I figured why not. I wanted to let you know that we are going to propose some changes to the covenants at the annual meeting. We want to add specific protections for homeowners and clear procedures for the board to follow when investigating alleged violations. We are calling them the Campbell rules, if that is okay with you." I was taken aback. "You do not need to name them after me. We want to. What Patricia did to you could have happened to any of us. We need safeguards to make sure it never happens again." Tom and I have been working with David Schultz to draft language that protects both the community's interests and individual homeowner rights. I appreciate that, Jim. Really. We are also going to require annual audits of HOA finances by an independent accountant. Patricia stole 30 grand from us over 2 years, and nobody noticed because she was the only one who saw the books. That cannot happen again. The annual HOA meeting in November was the best attended in the neighborhood's history. Nearly every homeowner showed up to vote on the proposed covenant amendments. Tom Richardson presented the changes, explaining how each provision would prevent the kind of abuse that had occurred under Patricia's presidency. The amendments passed unanimously. The Campbell rules, as they became known, established that homeowners had to receive written notice of alleged violations with photographic evidence, had the right to respond in writing before any fines were assessed, could appeal any decisions to the full board rather than just the president, and could request mediation before any legal action was taken. The amendments also required monthly financial reports to be posted online where all homeowners could review them, and mandated annual independent audits. Several other HOAs in the Jacksonville area adopted similar rules after hearing about our case. David Schultz helped draft template language that could be adapted to different communities. What had started as a personal nightmare for me ended up improving HOA governance across the region. I kept working as a landscape contractor, my business growing steadily as word spread about my professionalism and reliability. The irony was not lost on me that Patricia's attempt to destroy my workshop had ended up making me somewhat famous in local business circles. Contractors and homeowners who heard the story wanted to work with the guy who had stood up to his HOA and won. My workshop remained exactly as it had been, a simple but functional building where I stored equipment and organized my business. The new cameras I installed captured nothing more interesting than the occasional raccoon or neighborhood cat. The reinforced locks were never tested by another break-in. Everything was peaceful and exactly how it should have been from the beginning. On the 2-year anniversary of the night Patricia was arrested at the HOA meeting, Tom Richardson organized a neighborhood barbecue at the clubhouse. It was a beautiful evening in late spring, with clear skies and a gentle breeze. Families gathered with their kids, people played cornhole and volleyball, and someone brought a sound system for music. Tom pulled me aside as the party was winding down. "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. I know it was not easy going through that trial and all the publicity. But you really did save this neighborhood. Patricia would have kept getting worse if you had not stood up to her." "I just wanted my chainsaw back," I said with a smile. "Well, you got that and a whole lot more. Seriously, though, you set an example for all of us about not letting bullies win, even when they have authority." I looked around at my neighbors laughing and enjoying the evening together, at the community that had been damaged by Patricia's corruption and had come together to heal and improve. It was exactly the kind of neighborhood I had hoped to live in when I first moved to Riverside Oaks. The legal system had worked the way it was supposed to. Patricia had committed crimes and been held accountable. I had pursued justice through proper channels rather than vigilante action, or just giving up and moving away. The HOA had implemented reforms to prevent future abuse. Everyone had learned important lessons about power, accountability, and the rule of law. My Husqvarna chainsaw sat in its proper place in my tool cabinet, cleaned and maintained and ready for the next job. It was just a piece of equipment, but it represented something larger. The principle that your property rights matter, that you have the right to pursue your livelihood without harassment, and that nobody, not even an HOA president, is above the law. The workshop behind my house still stands solid and well built, exactly as it was when I first constructed it with proper permits and approvals. It serves its purpose perfectly, allowing me to organize my business efficiently and separate my work equipment from my living space. The HOA no longer bothers me about it. The new board members understand that reasonable people can have workshops and home businesses without diminishing the neighborhood. Sometimes late at night when I am working on equipment maintenance or organizing for the next day's jobs, I think about that Saturday morning when Patricia showed up at my door to complain about noise that barely happened. I think about how a reasonable conversation could have ended the whole thing before it started. If she had just been willing to check her facts, to treat me with basic respect, to follow the rules she claimed to care so much about, none of the subsequent nightmare would have occurred. But Patricia had chosen a different path. She had chosen harassment over dialogue, theft over legal remedies, and lies over truth. Those choices had consequences that she was still living with. A felony record, time in prison, a destroyed marriage, a ruined reputation, financial ruin from restitution and legal fees, and a life permanently marked by her crimes. I had chosen differently. When faced with harassment, I documented everything. When my property was stolen, I reported it to police. When I was falsely accused, I defended myself with facts and evidence. When I had to testify in court, I told the truth. Those choices had consequences too: vindication, justice, respect from my community, and the satisfaction of knowing I had stood up for what was right. The story could have ended many different ways. I could have just let Patricia harass me indefinitely, maybe eventually selling my house and moving away. Patricia could have stopped her harassment after the first few complaints did not work. She could have accepted that my workshop was legal and moved on. She definitely could have chosen not to break into my property and steal my equipment. But things unfolded the way they did, and the result was as clear as it was decisive. Patricia Henderson, former HOA president, convicted felon, learned the hardest way possible that authority comes with limits and that criminal behavior will be punished. The justice system worked. The community recovered. I got my chainsaw back and continued building my business. As I lock up my workshop each night and head back to my house, I feel satisfied knowing that everything I built is legitimate, earned through hard work and protected by law. My property rights are secure. My business thrives. My neighbors respect me. The HOA operates fairly and transparently. Everything is exactly as it should be in a well-functioning community. Patricia Henderson stole my chainsaw thinking she could get away with it because of her position of authority. She was wrong. The police arrested her for burglary. A jury convicted her. A judge sent her to prison. She lost her freedom, her reputation, her marriage, her home, and her future. All because she could not accept that she did not have the power to override my property rights or the law itself. That is how the story ends. Not with ambiguity or compromise, but with clear consequences for clear actions. Justice served, lessons learned, community restored, and one well-maintained Husqvarna chainsaw back where it belongs, ready for honest work.